have to figure out some way to get the non-radicalized people to rat out the very scary radicalized people who may come to kill them. Um, uh, and how are we going to? The item number one in engineering that cooperation can't be, let's force all these people to destroy the most profitable crop they could grow because of our drug laws.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. The unfortunate thing for me, though, is that there's a ton of evidence that the United States government has been involved in drug smuggling. There was a CIA jet that had been to Guantanamo Bay twice that crashed with several tons of cocaine in Mexico. Pull that up; it's kind of hilarious. It's you see this jet, and inside of it is just stacked with cocaine.
Right.
I think. Obviously, this is probably not the entire organization, but there's some factions that are profiting off of it. They have forever.
Right.
There's a guy named Barry Seal who was involved in, back during the Pablo Escobar days. He was, according to him, he was selling drugs for the CIA. There's also what happened with Freeway Ricky and the whole Oliver North Contras in Nicaragua situation. The United States was clearly involved in drug trafficking to promote a hidden war. This is the plane. Crashed with several tons of cocaine. Look at all that cocaine. That's hilarious. And that's a jet that had been to Guantanamo Bay twice. I mean, I don't want to go too far down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole with you, but you have to take that into consideration that there's a lot of evidence that some fuckery is afoot and has been for a long time, whether it was in Southeast Asia, heroin in the Vietnam War, or whether it's this right now.
Right.
I mean, there's something, and when you say that it costs so much money anyway, but to who? It doesn't cost so much money to Halliburton. It doesn't cost so much money to all these companies that are profiting off of war. That's the idea, is that war is very profitable for the people who get the government contracts and go over there and build airplane hangars and all these different things that they're doing over there.
Right.
It's not. We're not talking about what's profitable or not profitable for the United States taxpayer. We're talking about the people that are actually controlling the game in the first place.
Yeah, well, that's the issue. Is there someone controlling the game, and are their interests aligned enough so that they really have control over it? So, and that I think is, in most cases, I'm not saying that people never conspire or that it's not possible to have a sufficient number of people in power who have selfish and short-sighted interests that can get them to do terrible things on the world stage. I mean, that clearly could happen, at least in principle. But for the most part, there's just people's interests are not aligned all that well. Halliburton is not that powerful, so that it could decide to launch a war. And so and I mean, one way you can see this, or one thing I would get you to reflect on, is you take someone like President Obama. When he was Senator Obama, he was against the Iraq War. He was
allegedly.
Yeah, but he spoke on this point.
Right.
He was a critic. He was certainly a
critic.
critic.
Means nothing if you base it on what he's told us since he's gotten office and what turns out to be true.
So I'm asking how you account for that transformation in him. So he's someone who was a critic of the former administration. If you had, before he was elected, if you had asked him, what do you think about Bush, and what do you think about Cheney, and what do you think about Rumsfeld, and what all the stuff they did?
War profiteers.
He would have a, and this all this came. I'm not just speculating. He said many of these things, but he had a very clear critique based on liberal principles that almost any liberal who was enthusiastic about his election would recognize. That the Iraq War was unnecessary. We went in there on false pretenses. This was a terrible idea. The consequences, now there's a mess that has to be cleaned up. But now he's become, to the eyes of many liberals, just a neocon shill, someone who's more secretive and more agile in his prosecution of a covert war than Bush and Cheney ever were. How do you explain that transformation? Is he someone who was always that way and was just lying, but lying for some reason that doesn't make much political sense, or was he? Is there some nefarious process where, you know, some star chamber where the people who are really in power got to him and scared him. Like he's president of the United States, but he had a meeting with Halliburton and a bunch of powerful guys, some billionaires who scared him straight, and now he's just doing their bidding. Or
You don't believe that's possible?
no, I don't think. I think that's no, I don't think that's possible. But and this is the obviously the interpretation I favor. Or are the facts of the world so scary, and is governance so messy, and is it so fucking hard to get anything done that this process of apparent transformation just happens? You know, so he got in office. He's a senator who's not really privy to all the facts. Now he's president who every morning wakes up and is told the scariest intelligence we've got. What does that do to you? And how eager does that make you to make sure that a terrorist incident of an order of magnitude larger than September 11th doesn't happen on your watch? I mean, imagine having the responsibility to protect whole cities from massive acts of terror. Just how squeamish are you going to be about bugging people's cell phones? I think it's very easy to see that through no evil hand behind the scenes, you could have somebody like Obama, who was a genuine liberal. You know, I mean, he's not as far left as many people want him to be, but there's no reason to doubt that he objected to the Iraq War, and he's basically a straight down the middle of the fairway liberal, who's now essentially functioning like a neocon. I think the details have to be terrifying, and I think it's just it's an immense responsibility.
I don't think it's either or. I think it's very possible. Excuse me. It's very possible that both things are going on. It's very possible that there are people that are absolutely profiting and want to get involved in wars for profit. Well, and I think also the world is scary, and I think it's easy to convince a guy like Obama.
I don't doubt that Halliburton sees an upside to a war because they make all the stuff, you know,
right?
And they provide the services. So yeah, it's part. The next war is part of their business plan. But the question is, how much power does any one person have? For every billionaire like the Koch brothers who's twirling his mustache and doing the nefarious right-wing thing, there are billionaires who do not align with them politically, who can do the left-wing thing.
Right, but that's a microcosm of human beings in general. There's evil people and there's nice people. That doesn't necessarily preclude the idea that someone not just profits off war, but engineers war for profit. It seems if you're talking about something like billions and billions of dollars, and you can justify to yourself this inevitable anyway because these people are cave people, and they're going to fuck up, and you got all these. Look what they do to women. Look what they do to their people. Look what they do to each other. Look what they do to fellow Muslims. You're also maybe not making the best humanitarian choices because you're making choices based on profit. And the profit is absolutely enormous. I mean, it's massive. And there's pretty clear evidence the United States basically lied to get into the Iraq War. I mean, I know that there was a lot of people that genuinely believed that there was something going on in Iraq and genuinely believed that Saddam Hussein was a threat. Well, there's also people that believe it was a whole lot of fuckery, including Colin Powell.
Well. Everyone believed when Colin Powell delivered that presentation at the UN. Virtually everyone, with a few exceptions, virtually everyone believed that was true. No one. It was uncontroversial. The premise that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction was uncontroversial, and all the people who were against our going in there were against it for reasons that did not entail doubting whether there were weapons of mass destruction. There were other reasons not to go in there. It's just it was a hornet's nest. It was a quagmire. It was
What specifically are the weapons of mass destruction that would motivate us going there and not going into North Korea?
Oh, right. So because of the
there's no money in North Korea.
Well, no, there's that, but no, because he didn't have nukes. He was trying to get nukes, or we thought he was trying to get nukes. So we could deal with a chemical weapons attack. You give everyone a gas mask and a hazmat suit, and we can still fight a war. The nukes change the game, and that's one reason why Pakistan is so terrifying.
So you don't open yourself up to the possibility of conspiracy.
No, I
just...
do. I just know that this is an adage. I don't know where it comes from, but never ascribe to conspiracy what can be explained by incompetence.
Or the tragedy of wasted opportunity. The idea that just because a tragedy gets capitalized on doesn't mean that the people who capitalize on it caused the tragedy.
Right.
But that's a standard operational procedure for warriors to find something wrong and say, look, this is what happened. We got attacked. We're going into Iraq.
Right. Right. Yeah, I see in every conspiracy, and again, I'm not doubting whether anyone ever conspires. It's just that there's so many constraints on people doing what they want, especially when they're nefarious things. The constraints largely being everyone else's opposing wants. That it's hard for people to bring these big plans off.
But isn't that your argument for eavesdropping on people in the first place? That they're planning big plans? Somebody said this. I forget who it was. I think somebody said it on the podcast.
But it's a different scale of conspiracy. I mean, so you look at the 19 hijackers.
Okay.
It's just 19 guys with box cutters.
Yeah, but it's a big organization. I mean, that's not just 19 guys. Those guys planned it out. They had help. They learned how to fly. They pulled it off. Someone said this.
But it's not. It's not launching a war. It's not. 500,000 guys and tanks.
Right, because it's 19 guys and not Halliburton, not a multi-billion-dollar operation that the CEO, the former CEO, just happens to be the vice president of the United States and gets multi-billion-dollar no-bid contracts to go and rebuild shit we blow up. I mean, it's pretty connect the dots. If you wanted to argue for a war for profit, that's about as cut and dry as it ever gets. Someone said on the podcast, I forget who it was. I don't know who it was. Maybe I read it online. Someone said, do you believe in 9/11? Ask people if they believe in conspiracies. Do you believe in 9/11? Like, what do you mean? Do you believe 9/11 was done as a conspiracy by the government? No. Do you believe it happened? And everyone says yes. Well, then you believe in conspiracies. Because it was a conspiracy. Someone conspired to fly planes into buildings, and whether or not the United States government was involved or whether or not it was these 19 guys from Saudi Arabia, they pulled that off. Conspiracies exist.
But something like 35% of Americans believe that the U.S. had some hand in that conspiracy.
Is it really that high?
That we let it happen. And 16% think that we engineered it.
I hate those things, though. Because
so that we demoed the buildings. That someone in the dead of night had to fill the Twin Towers with thermite, and that we hit the plunger at the right moment, just after the planes went in, or maybe they weren't even planes, maybe they were holograms. And once you get deep into this, the 9/11 conspiracy, you get the CIA faking voices of all the passengers on the flights, explaining the answering machine messages of the relatives of the dead passengers by CIA voice faking technology, and it's completely insane, and the problem with it is it's totally unconstrained by any overall explanation or plausible hypothesis about what could have happened. What it is you look at every anomaly. I mean, any event you could possibly describe is going to have a million what look like coincidences in it, and which if you tried to engineer beforehand would seem like the odds against them were astronomical. But in the aftermath, something had to happen. So it's like people sold stock in American Airlines that day, right? So how is it that you sold your stock in American Airlines the day before an American Airlines jet flew into a building? Right? How do that's fishy, right?
Well, the real problem is you find other people buy and sell those stocks every day.
Yeah, exactly. There are uncountable number of things like that. But if you're only looking for anomalies and you're not constrained by any overall thesis, you can find them in any situation. But I mean, just be honest about what this picture of reality actually is. This is the most diabolical plot in human history that entailed thousands of conspiracists, conspirators, and none of them have cracked. No one woke up feeling so guilty that they had to tell their story and to 60 Minutes. And yet this whole thing was designed to leave George Bush reading My Pet Goat at the moment it all kicked off. It's just not. It's like it's this the marriage of perfectly competent diabolical intelligence with the most inept. So all these people conspired perfectly, and yet the Iraq War was launched as ineptly as it could possibly have been.
Well, I certainly don't believe that the United States was involved in conspiring. I think there's some question that maybe some people might have known about it. The real issue comes when you find out about actual real false flags. Real false flag events that the United States has engineered, that they've pulled off, that they haven't pulled off, that they were planning, that they didn't go through. The real problem is that that's a genuine ideology. That's a genuine thought process. The idea of, look, we have to make this happen. This is what we're going to do. We're going to blow up a ship. We're going to blow up a jet airliner and blame it on the Cubans, the Operations Northwoods.
Right. Well, but that's so. So if you wanted to run a false flag operation and get us into a war with Iraq under false pretenses, so we've got a no-fly zone over Iraq for years that we've been policing with our F-16s. You just shoot down one of our planes, and then you tell the world that Iraq, though we told them they couldn't shoot at us, shot down one of our planes. This is an act of war. We're going in. That would have been totally justifiable. What you don't do is send mostly Saudis to come kill 3,000 of the most connected people on Earth.
We're in agreement.
And destroy our economy.
We're in agreement. I don't think that the United States engineered it. Not in any way, shape, or form. So I know some people do, and
many people do. Yeah.
But you know what? 46% of Americans think the Earth is less than 10,000 years old. And the problem with those polls are, those are 100% idiots that answer the polls. Who fucking answers polls? I don't answer a poll. Nobody I know answers polls. People call you up randomly in the middle of the day and ask you to answer a poll. Most likely you're busy. Most likely you're going to hang up. The amount of people that actually answer polls, I don't think they represent the real, the real population of the United States. Right. Well, so when you say it's 13%, it's 13% of the people that you polled.
Right, but there are ways of correcting for that. So, for instance, you could just poll college students. You could literally be in a poli-sci class and ask people who got into college and are attending class. I mean, that would be an elite sample, but you get weird.
Sure,
you get weird opinions even among elite samples.
Well, that number, the 46% of Americans believe the Earth is less than 10,000 years old. That's a real one. That's a Gallup poll.
Oh yeah.
That's that alone throws polls like, 13% think the United States engineered 9/11. Okay, that's nothing compared to the idea that the Earth is 10,000 years old. The amount of evidence that the Earth is more than 10,000 years old is staggering, and yet a way higher percentage believe in that. But
that's because it's a religious doctrine,
of course,
and that has been
conspiracies.
Stable.
Aren't they religious? Isn't a belief that the government engineered 9/11, or isn't a million different conspiracies? Don't they have sort of a religious aspect to them? The pure belief, the confirmation bias, the ignoring anything contradictory. People want to have an answer for sure, definitely, whether it's pro or con. There's that real thing that people want to wrap something up tight with a bow. Either the government is full of evil criminals that are trying to kill your baby, or it's all just a part of life, and the real issue is there's boogeymen out there.
Yeah. No, I think there is. It hijacks some of the same features of the human mind, or of certain human minds, because many people are very uncomfortable without cognitive closure. They're very not knowing why something happened is destabilizing to people to different degrees, and whereas one person can just feel no emotional cost to living with the mystery of why something happened, or freely admitting whether they have no idea, or merely having a hunch. Other people crave certainty, and there are other features to it. So people have an intuition that something huge couldn't have been kicked off by something trivial. So if something huge happened, if this 3,000 people dead, and the biggest buildings coming down, and the world in chaos, that couldn't have been just 19 guys with box cutters. That had to be, the cause had to be bigger. And that I think is an intuition that some people have more than others, and it's a faulty intuition. But it's some people have certain schemas that through which they view human events, which make conspiracy thinking very
Attractive.
just very plausible. And you'll notice that, and there's been actually research done on this, that if you're someone who believes one conspiracy theory, you're very likely to be someone who believes all of them. And you're someone who's read the JFK books and who's read the Roswell incident. I mean, you're talking about extraterrestrials and CIA misadventures in many places. I mean, there's a whole esoteric literature out there that I'm not so familiar with, but I know that people who go down one rabbit hole tend to go down many of the others.
Sure.
And it's kind of a personality type that I think you can become. I tried to. It's interesting. You mentioned you asked me what I thought about the NSA thing, and to some degree, my perception of this news event has been polluted by my relationship with Glenn Greenwald, who
You don't like that guy?
no. But I actually started. It was interesting as I started out liking him, not liking him in that I aligned with all of his views or even many of his views, but we had a brief personal exchange by email where he actually did me a favor, which was great, and it actually links up with this conspiracy thing. So I have someone in my life who's very close to me who is a 9/11 conspiracy.
Very close to you?
Yeah. Member
Someone's dad or something?
a member of my family who is a and a very bright guy who is a 9/11 conspiracy guy. And so I fought with him about this for years. So like every 6 months, it blows up, and we'll write we'll have the 2-hour email exchange. And I've tried to debunk this, and one idea I had about how to debunk it is I noticed that he had a few liberal writers who he really admired, and Glenn Greenwald was the top of the list. And I knew that Glenn Greenwald couldn't be a 9/11 conspiracy guy.
Right.
So I reached out to Glenn. I'd never met Glenn. And I said, will you do me a favor and just tell me in a short little essay why you don't believe any of this stuff? Why is it that you seem to align with a lot of these concerns, the overreach of power and NSA wiretapping, and why is someone in your position not at all attracted by this 9/11 truth nonsense? And he wrote the perfect email. And I told him why I needed this. I mean, it was basically an intervention for a family member. He wrote the perfect email, which was just crazy enough to give him perfect credibility. I mean, he was grateful for the 9/11 truth people, and it was a perfect email. And I imagined that I was going to send this into my my relative's brain, and he was going to have the epiphany that I was expecting, which was, here's someone he trusts as an authority on all of these points, and this is why this guy, who's got much more time to look at this than my relative does, this is why he won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And it did not have that effect at all. All he wanted to do was to get in touch with Glenn Greenwald, to show him
to
all
educate
this,
him.
Yeah, to educate him, show him all the stuff that he hadn't seen. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I started in this place with Glenn, feeling very positive toward him, and then he just basically in a very unethical way misrepresented my views in a series of articles. And when I called him on it privately, he just doubled down. He basically just said, "Fuck you. This is what even if you don't think this is what you were saying, this is what I think you were saying."
Oh, wow.
And
what was his argument? What was his point? Like, what was he trying to paint?
Well, it was this whole Islamophobia business. He basically branded me a racist who hates Muslims, and there's an animus against people. I'm not talking about ideas. This is
just by you asking him to write something. No.
This was unrelated.
Oh.
This is why the NSA thing was sort of hit me in the wrong part of my brain, because when Glenn was the quarterback for the Snowden revelations, basically, I saw a guy who's just blogging in his underpants in Brazil with his 10 dogs and his boyfriend, who was handed this story, which is in fact true. I mean, he's not this great investigative journalist who found this. he was, based on his ideological bias and his record, was someone who Snowden liked and thought would be a very sympathetic ear for this story, and he just handed him this story. I mean, so tomorrow night someone could email you the next big decades shaking story,
Right.
based on your interests and how they align with his, and that wouldn't make you the greatest investigative journalist. So anyway, so Greenwald was someone who really was not functioning like a journalist, and he certainly does not have the principles of honesty and fact checking and admitting when he was wrong, got something wrong, that most journalists have drummed into them. So I find him a very unreliable witness.
Have you spoken to him in person?
Well, we have a long exchange.
But email. Just
yeah,
email.
Yeah.
I fucking hate email. I mean, I love it, but I hate it for clarifying something as important as this.
Yeah, no, it's true, but and this is another way technology is screwing us up, because we're able to, things run off the rails when you're writing in a way that they wouldn't face to face.
Yeah, like a blog about someone.
Yeah.
You could write some horrible things. Whereas if you were sitting in front of that person talking to them and you said that, I'd be like, well, I don't think that. No, you've misinterpreted my position. Right. I think this. And
the Mexicans, and certain Mexicans against other Mexicans, but it's just like it's shattered into racial gangs, and a white guy like you would have to join a white supremacist gang. Now, you might not have a racist bone in your body, but the only way for you not to be fucked over by everyone is to align yourself with a gang.
But isn't what you're saying another reason to not trust the government? You're saying that the government's evil. You're saying that good people do evil things because they get involved with evil psychopaths, meaning the government. Which is why
I'm saying that
false flags occur.
No, I'm saying that we need to be aware of the way incentives can be perverse, where your natural selfishness and your natural fear and your natural desire just to survive can be channeled in ways that make you, as an otherwise good person, collaborate to